touting his policy of, quote, crucifying oil and gas companies. But 4 more Republican congressmen are now demanding that administrator, Al Armendariz, step down in the wake of these 2010 comments just made public this week.
I was in a meeting once and I gave an analogy to my staff about my philosophy of enforcement, and I think it was probably a little crude and maybe not appropriate for the meeting, but I'll go ahead and tell you what I said. It was kind of like how the Romans used to conquer little villages in the Mediterranean. They'd go to a little Turkish town somewhere, they'd find the first 5 guys they saw, they'd crucify them. And then, that town was really easy to manage for the next few years.
Well, one of the congressmen now calling for this EPA administrator to go is Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Congressman Scalise joins us now by phone. Congressman, thank you for being here. So the guy's apologized. He said he didn't, it wasn't an accurate representation of his policies, and he said at the time it was a crude way to describe the policy. Why is that not good enough?
Well, Megan, of course, if you look at what he said, this is his philosophy, and the unfortunate thing is he's carrying this out. He's the regional director, the regional administrator of the EPA in an area where there's a lot of oil and gas activity, and he's made it his mission to go out and crucify energy companies. And these aren't all companies that are guilty. There are a lot of companies that didn't violate any rules, and EPA goes after them, they crucify them. Later, they don't even file any charges, and yet the damage is done. And I think what's most concerning, Megan, is that this is a pattern by the Obama administration of a very anti-business attitude. And you've got regulators like this who are carrying out a radical agenda rather than enforcing the rules. And there's no place in the federal bureaucracy for people who are more focused on carrying out their own agenda than enforcing the rules and the laws that Congress passes.
Is it anti-business or is it pro-environment? Because this guy's suggestion is that, look, we've got limited resources. I can't go after all of the lawbreakers. He was, if you look at the full context of the remarks, he was talking about not just targeting any random companies, but targeting companies that they believe are lawbreakers and setting an example so that, given that they have limited resources, other companies will fall in line, clean up their act without having to spend more taxpayer dollars.
It's more on the lines of intimidation and anti-business. It's not pro-environment, because there are a lot of radical environmentalist groups who want to run jobs off to China and other countries, and that actually emits more carbon and other things. At the end of the day, they've had a pattern, not just in what they say, but in what they actually do, of going after companies that don't violate rules, that end up not being charged with anything, not being found guilty of anything, and yet the damage is done because they seek out to crucify these companies just to make an example that, look, we're tough, we're beating up on people that produce energy in America. And if that's their agenda, go join a private group and try to change policy. But the law of the land is clear, and they're not supposed to be policymakers. This guy was appointed by Barack Obama, and we understand what President Obama's agenda is, but he's supposed to be implementing policy as an EPA administrator, not pushing his own radical agenda.
Mr. Armendariz talked a little bit more in those 2010 remarks about how he does it, how he makes examples out of these companies he believes are lawbreakers or are violating the rules at least. Here's what he said. Take a listen.
We do have some pretty effective enforcement tools. Compliance can get very high very, very quickly, and that's what these companies respond to. Is both their public image, but also financial pressure. So it puts some financial pressure on a company to get other people in that industry to clean up very quickly. So that's our general philosophy.
So he's saying the philosophy is you find them and you make their public image take a hit or two, and then these companies get in line. You say that he's unfairly targeted the companies he's doing that to. Do you have any examples, Congressman?
Yeah, there are a number of examples of the EPA, and not just in Region 6, but in a number of other areas, actually going after companies, filing charges that end up being bogus. They pull back the charges, but they make a lot of inflammatory statements and defame these individual companies. And in the end, they don't even bring charges, or else the company is completely exonerated, and yet the damage is done because reputation's harmed. In many cases, they've had to shut down their projects, and American jobs are lost in this process, by the way. So it's a pattern. It's not just something that they're doing to try to go after people who break the law. But if a police officer accuses you of something, that's one thing. But there's a process. There's a court process. And if you're innocent of those charges, you shouldn't be crucified, to use his terms, just because he wants to set an example and carry out a radical agenda. There's supposed to be a justice system in place where if you're innocent, you shouldn't be attacked and brutalized and crucified by your own federal government.
Well, so far, the administration, the White House, has refused to call for him to step down. And the EPA administrator, Lisa Jackson, spoke out today. I'm just reading it now, and said that he has apologized. He's acknowledged his comments were wrong. She says they were inflammatory and they don't comport with the administration's policy. But it does not look like they are asking him to step down. In fact, when she was asked, should he be punished, she simply said, we'll continue to review it. Congressman, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Megan.
All the best.